Good afternoon. I wanted to give my response to publication which devoted in international press to Ukraine, to governance of Ukraine, and to inner political situation in Ukraine. I think that's the first point which interesting for foreigners and for people who wanted to invest to Ukraine, who wanted to have some contracts with Ukrainians. Firstly, it's important how it look like as inner policy situation. And of course, they start from Zelensky, because Zelensky it's a person which with incredible success. And many people in international community and of course in inner policy understand that Zelensky will be symbol of democracy and will build new democracy institutions. On my point of view, it's not true, and it's my point of view from the beginning of Zelensky campaign. Why? Because as you know, in Ukraine, every elections cost like $30 million for every election for big political forces. Why so expensive? Because we have very expensive advertising, TV advertising, mostly TV channels. It's oligarchic TV channels. That's why even you have money, you can't go to this TV channel if you haven't some negotiations with this political group, unfortunately, or it's extremely expensive. Digital campaigning is not so deep because people very poor, and in villages they can't use smartphones and quick internet. It's also important for understand. And that's why it's also issue why Zelensky so quickly became popular, because he had a very popular comic show, and he was like a person from person as me, yes, self-made man, person from little town Kryvyi Rih, it's industrial town, who developed his career. So as image and as inner feeling, he was very exciting, but he hasn't any experience in public service, not in government, not in municipal power, like counties, not in NGOs. So he was actor, and he don't take any political participation at all before ratings start to count his rating as popular person. As you know, in many countries, like populists and TV stars became politicians, and you can mention me that in American history also was people who come from TV shows and from films from Hollywood. Yes, but in US there are many institutions, and here in Ukraine, if you create political force for 2 months and take some people from your network to members of parliament, of course it doesn't work. And of course it's was by donations of big financial structures. They called also oligarchs, because main TV channel where Zelensky was, it's 1+1, it's Kolomoisky Holding. You can write about Mr. Kolomoisky. It's like a big Ukrainian oligarch who has huge influence here in Ukraine. And the next question can be, is it other way? For example, is it possible to build political force or to build political institution without oligarchs? I said yes, it's possible, but it's not for 2 months. I think that it's 5-10 years. It's possible to collect people with middle business, and this business a little bigger than middle, to cooperate them for real political force. Okay, so with Zelensky, I think that it's this situation, it's understandable, and my answer to question is it will be success story in democracy development, in rising quality of life. Of course not. If we will see some corruption scandals, of course we will see, and as you read in international press, many scandals also connected with trying of influence to international relations by administration of president. It's also not useful because like head of administration of president, it's like big office manager, but not the person who in charge for international policy. Now head of presidential administration, Mr. Yermak, take for him not natural and not in essence way to take in charge international relations. And I think that all scandals with Giuliani and with other famous persons in United States, they connected with this unusual behavior of presidential administration. I think so. After it, I think it's also interesting the future of biggest political force of Zelensky. Now they have supermajority in the Ukrainian parliament. I think that it will be clear. So like 30% of this party who has some experience in political work, they will go to new political forces, or they will work in Zelensky political forces in future, and other members of parliament who like take their positions in the wave of name of Zelensky, and in understanding him and in understanding him as leader. They of course can be the next time members of parliament, of course, because they have any experience. You know, in the period of Yanukovych, we have members of parliament who was like skiing trainer and massage professionals, and now in this parliament we also have people who like don't work anywhere, and now they members of parliament, so don't work anywhere. So for example, they were freelancer in video production or so on and so forth. It's about professional way. Second point, which I think can be interesting for international community, if it's of course other political forces. We have other political forces, and as you can imagine, it's like pro-Russian political forces and pro-European political forces. It's not so right, because for example in Moldova they have the same situation, like pro-Russians and pro-European, but maybe pro-European they also invested by Russia. That's why, like, let's start from people who in parliament. It's Yulia Tymoshenko's party, ex-prime minister. In one period of time, she has very huge structure on Ukraine. So like field structure, like departments, like grassroots campaign, it was very huge, and it exists for 17 years old, so it's one of the oldest political forces. We also have old political forces like Народный Рух, it's like patriotic party, but now they haven't big influence here in Ukraine. Also we have now a new political force which were led by Vakarchuk, it's singer, very famous Ukrainian singer. But on the last period, he came out from his own political force, and I think that it will be an unsuccessful story because it's also based on famous of this singer, and he was like pro-European singer. He think about democracy and about love. He support Maidan and so on and so forth. So he also was like Zelensky symbol, but for other audience. He also has some education by program of Stanford, if I remember right. Ukrainian analytics said that Vakarchuk's party, firstly supported by Pinchuk, it's also Ukrainian oligarch, and he relative of one Ukrainian president, Kuchma, who was in charge in the start of not in the start, but in the beginning time of Ukrainian history. Oppositional platform, it's like pro-Russian political forces, and they don't hide that they have pro-Russian vision, and it's supported by Medvedchuk. Also, many press said that he's a relative of Putin, and now he has huge influence really in Ukraine. And it's important to understand, and in media bloc and in political party bloc. So Medvedchuk has very big influence, and of course he is like systematic person. So he work with understandable system, and he work not only on election but also between election, in media, in field, in grassroots communication. And that's why his political force and political forces which connected with him has success. For example, we also have new political forces who also pro-Russian, like Shari's political forces. So it's virtual political force, but they also have in their messages, of course, supporting Russia. On my point of view, it's totally bad. It's totally bad, but we can handle it like Moldova handle also situation with their political force, with their pro-Russian influence. So what about other political forces? I think that for now we have some crisis in here. If you're interested in my points of view, I work as political manager with many people in Ukrainian policy, and also in parallel I work with Western democracies, with European Parliament, and with Americans. Also, I understand how institutions must look like for better quality of life, and that's why I think that now it's good moment for building new political forces, and that's why we also start to build political force national platform. I think it's long way, a very long way, but it's important to give new senses and new systems and new roadmap to Ukrainian policy. For example, we do like strategic session all over Ukraine with different sectors and spheres, and also with different regions about economic clusters. Now we have not so many, like more than 1,000 people in active and more than 16,000 who support. It's not very big numbers, but it's good, as I mentioned. But today it's not about it. It's about international press. So that's why I think that Russian influence it's totally important also in the question of cybersecurity, of course, in the question of hybrid war, in the question of media war. It's extremely important. The next point, it's connected about problems, and it's also very important that we have totally crisis in economy, and that's why many people understand international financial structures as enemy. So they understand that, okay, we have Russia as enemy, and we have also international financial structures in enemy. I separate, for example, anti-Soros movement, as Orban do in Ukraine. Opposition copy the same, and also like against any big country movement. So people are very against credits, but they don't understand that it's not a problem of financial institutions. It's a problem of corrupted politicians who take bad conditions for these credits, and who can't road programs and do reforms for better conditions. And that's why it's also very important point to understand how it's look like, and why people can be against international integration to global blocks, and so on and so forth. People live very bad. Medicine, it's horrible. Education, it's horrible. Little clinics closing, and in village territory we haven't any work. Pension of person can be from $70 to $250. It's for old people, without medical supply, without any services. And schools also closed, and we haven't new places for work. It's also important to understand why people can go to radical things. It's very important.